Hello, Westford. Let me informally introduce myself. My name is Richard Livingston, and I want you to know that I'm opening up a new cable program called Livingston's Ledger. And what it's going to do is it's going to be based on short stories of people who have inspirational things to share with us from the different walks of life. Today, I'd like to introduce a fellow whose lifelong journey has brought him to become a renowned architect for the Archdiocese of Boston. And in doing so, he's renovated and built many churches, St. Patrick's in Stoneham, St. Anne's in Littleton, and our own St. Catherick's of Alexandria here in Westford. So I thought it would be an interesting place to start. One thing that Angelo and I have in common, we both had an interest in furniture. We did cabinet making when we were in high school. And so when I moved here, everyone was telling me, throw that end tables and coffee tables, get rid of them, get rid of them, get rid of them. And I did not want to part with them because I built them 50 years ago. And Angelo built his end table and coffee tables that are here in his home 70 years ago. So I think that's the place we'll start.
Okay.
Why don't you open up by telling me the brief story of how you got interested in becoming an architect?
Well, I'm a Boston Trade School graduate. I graduated in 1957. From there, I went to work with my brother, who was in a firm ahead of me. I was in an engineering firm. I went to work with that firm, started as an office boy. In those days, they called it that. And 6 months later, I was put on the boards, which meant I was able to draw. And I went into the architectural department, which I knew zero about. But the interesting story is, I was there for 5 years. I learned from two incredible old-timers that taught me how to put a building together so it would not leak. Then I worked in a very contemporary building for the GE Space Simulator, which is very contemporary. And I worked with another architect named Perry. His last name was Perry. And I learned something different from the normal architecture that I was doing. And then from there, I found out I was not getting any credit toward my license because I wasn't working for an architectural firm. So I had to leave 5 years later, and I went to work for a firm called Aldo Minotti. He was an architect in Waltham, and there's a Catholic church out there that was built, and it looks like a giant blimp, and not very attractive. But that's what I worked on. And then all of a sudden, I got a note that in the draft people were looking for me. They want me to go into service, because at that time it was the building crisis. So I hustled around to find where I can get in the reservists. I wound up going into the medical division of the U.S. Air Force down in Boston. And I wound up spending 6 years of my life in the Air Force. The first 6 months in the Hanscom Field Air Force Base, and then I continued on as a reservist, and I went to work for another architectural firm, which is a firm called Associated Architect and Engineer. It was a firm, one of the first black firms in Boston. I was the only white person working there. And the two people there were great. The architect was named Henry Bowles, and the engineer was Paul Parks. Both very high schools. Henry went to Harvard.
I just interject something. Now, Paul Parks was named to be a member of the Boston School Committee, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then he went on to be named the first Secretary of Education under Michael Dukakis.
Right, first black.
Very, very active civil rights leader in the city of Boston at the time. So that's a wonderful experience. Was that part of that prompted you to want to go further into architect?
I was already into it because I'd been going to school. I went to Northeastern first for 2 years, night school. But I found out I didn't want to be an engineer. And in the meantime, I was lucky enough to meet a friend of mine who was in the same office I was in. He said, why don't you go to the Boston Architectural Center, which I did. and I was there for 5 or 6 years, and it got my education from them. And then I won the top prize, the Ames Traveling Scholarship, and it was worth that time $2,500. Now it's worth about $25,000. And I asked permission not to go to traveling, but I prefer further my education. So I asked them if I could pursue trying to get into Harvard or MIT. I went to MIT, they accepted me with open arms because they said, we'll make you a special student where you can take 4 terms of architecture. And I spent the first year on scholarship, it was 2 terms, and the second term, MIT gave me a full scholarship. And the money was between $1,500 and $1,750.
Come a long way in today's mind today.
Way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what would you say was your first breakthrough with regard to the diocese?
By going to work for Jackson and Morland, that was the engineering firm, into architecture. And that got me in the door. And I learned a lot of information which I didn't realize I was capable of.
Right.
And the 2 gentlemen that trained me were very good.
So a lesson to that is not to feel pigeonholed into the one area of, like you were engineering,
Yes.
but you wanted the architecture and you stepped outside the box.
I
And you
stepped
went after
out
it.
outside the box, right.
Fantastic, fantastic. Where do you get your inspiration when you're looking at different projects that you're using, that you're going to build?
Most of my projects have been Catholic church work, Protestant church work, and I've done many of them. And the thing I like is when I see that if they have an existing building, I try not to destroy the look of that building.
Right.
And I try to keep it intact. If I'm doing a brand new building, I try to listen to the client carefully so he knows that I'm going to pay attention to him. And not only him, but the committee. So when I get through at the first meeting, I have a very good idea where I'm going.
So you have a clear vision once you've seen the area, what you're going to be working with,
Yes.
the project, plus the people's feelings and
Right.
input as to what it is they want, and you
Right.
keep that.
Not what I want, what they're looking for.
Right. So you keep, and then that brings you the vision that you need to do it.
Yes.
Do you ever have a full vision of your entire building that you're going to be developing when you're doing your conceptual drawings?
Usually I do. What happens, I don't sleep much. So
I know
I'm
that feeling.
awake all night thinking about what I'm going to do for a new project.
Yeah.
And pretty much I have a rough first scheme. And when I present that, most people kind of welcome it. And they can't believe that in a short term that I have already created their floor plans, their elevations, and the building to look like what they're thinking about.
All in your
I
mind.
find that
So you have a common theme in your mind, in your spirit, as to what it is you want when you, especially when you're designing a church.
Yes.
After listening to everybody,
yes.
it's proved to be very successful.
In some cases, when I'm interviewed, I usually do a drawing to show what we think they're talking about. Because some churches send you a program of what they want. So I have a good idea in a plot plan. And sometimes I don't even follow what they're asking, but I'm going to do a whole new concept. And when I go to make the presentation, they're blown away because they didn't think of that.
Right.
They had a fixation of what they wanted, they thought they wanted. And then when I come up with a new concept, they're usually very happy about that.
I love it. Do you have any heroes in life or within the industry that you would look up to?
Well, I've known a lot of architects since I went to a popular school. And I would say I was fortunate enough to work for some architects who do the normal work. Then I worked for architects that had a lot of imagination. So that's where I got my inspiration from. And the more I get into the business, the more I can see myself thinking beyond the box.
Excellent.
You know, and when I was at MIT, I really found out I can think beyond the box because they would encourage you to come up with your own ideas. And then when I went to work for another firm, when we got a new project, we would ask the fellow architects to come up with their own design scheme and have given 2 days to do it. And they do it at home, and then they come in, then we have a select committee of like myself, I was the vice president, and with my partners, who were the owners of the business, we sit around in a conference room and we talk about each person's scheme, and then we intermix the schemes sometimes and put it together.
I love it. Given that you've been in the industry for well over 50, 60 years.
68 years.
68 years, wow, almost as old as me. Is there something marvelous innovation that has happened in the industry to make your life easier that you might want to share?
Yes, there have been a lot of innovations. I tend to do more traditional buildings. Our office has done maybe 100 banks. And, they wanted to look like something that is not strange. So there were a lot of plastic-made molds that you can copy a Corinthian column, for instance, or a Doric column. And you can get all that stuff out of a catalog, which is nice because you're not putting it out of limestone or stone. You're not reinventing.
Right. You shared with me earlier that some of the columns in the churches are basically fiberglass,
Yes.
and the marble is painted on. So you're bringing in another artist.
I have a friend of mine that's an artist who does faux work, F-A-U-X, and he's amazing. We did St. Patrick's and Stoneham, and we had all these existing columns that were marble, and we made them out of fiberglass. And he came in and put the faux of the marble around all those columns. You would not know the difference.
Wow.
Plus, I had 12 metal doors. They didn't fit with the building. So I asked them to fold the doors to oak. You would never know they were faux.
Wow.
Beautiful. They look like real doors.
Now, so are there any unique things about St. Catherine's in Alexandria? I know that you have a lot of passion and you just love what you had to work with there.
Well, I met Father Dan Cronin through friends of ours, and he had this committee invite me for an interview for his church. He always wanted to build a parish center. And finally I did the interview. There were 7 architects. I was one of them. And I always try to do a sketch ahead of time, trying to listen to their program. And when I came up with the concept, they did not believe what I came up with. And I gave more building for the dollar sign than other architects were doing.
Right.
Because I can build buildings, they can look like brick. They're brick, but they're not solid brick. Right. And I had many a discussion with the diocese about building that way, because I tend to build for economical costs. We had $1.3 million to build that building,
Right.
the community center, or the parish center. And we came in, first price came in at 1.8, after going out to 9 bidders.
Wow.
So then I negotiated with the general contractor. Without losing anything, I brought it down to 1.35.
And you also, from my understanding is, you added in there something that they weren't anticipating, which is the basement, instead of having a complete concrete form for a solid surrounding, one half of it is glass, but you gave them that added space for CCD rooms and things of that nature.
We had advantage of a sloped grade, and they wanted me to fill up with a concrete wall and put slab on grade. I said, no. We already had the advantage of having a slope grade. Why don't we just dig out the rest of the foundation, which we did, and put a glass wall overlooking the back, and that became the future CCD center. And upstairs was designed originally for a CCD center, but the parish grew so fast, they needed those rooms for office space. And in the meantime, the big community room was a 2-story space, glass on one end and glass on the side in dormers. And I also by accident, the building was supposed to be 8,000 square feet with the basement. There's an area that's 4,000 square feet that we built that got utilized afterwards for more CCT spaces, conference room, which they didn't expect to have at all. And that was all part of that 1.3.
The other thing that fascinated me in our conversation was when discussing the church itself, you were telling me how it originally was a rectangle, and when you designed it, it's now the shape of a cross, adding all that added space, and it just blend in. I never knew in all my time coming up to Westford over the last 10 years that wasn't all the original. The rectangle was the original church, and then you did the designs too.
What happened when the parish center was built, all of a sudden a lot of people were going to Westford, since it's the only Catholic church in the area, other than in Carlisle. But when they came there, it got overloaded. So the bishop said to the new pastor, I want you to expand the building. So what happened, the building was a rectangle, and we added on 2 wings, which went from 450 to 900 seats. Wow. And then we put on a gathering space on the front of the building, and everything was matching to blend in with the original building. So when you drive out there and see this building, you would not know it's 2 separate buildings. Wow. And the detail of the interior from the original St. Catherine's, we copied into the new wings. So when you walk on the front door, you have a gathering space, you go up what was the original stairs to the church, and you're there. And Father at the time wanted to have a circular altar in the middle so people can gather around it. And what I understand now, the new pastor has put 4 rocking chairs around that area.
Yes, so, and people love it. They just can go in. The doors are usually open during the daytime, that you can go through your parish center glass doors and go into the church. And if you want to sit on the altar on a rocking chair and just meditate, and so it's a really beautiful, beautiful concept what he has, complementing your work.
Yes, thank you. But I like that was my first Catholic church job. Right. I can't even remember the date. I know it's at least 30 years ago.
Now, I want to segue over to, you also did the sister church to St. Catherine's of Alexandria, which happens to be St. Anne's in Littleton. Yes. Could you tell me some more about that?
When I got hired for Littleton, again, I was referred by other pastors, because usually you got to go through the diocese. But when a pastor requests an architect, they do not discuss it. And St. Anne's was one of those jobs. They needed to have accessibility to the main floor. The church was up 7 feet and down 7 feet. So we put a new elevator in with the access from the parking lot. And I wanted to blend it with the church. And we blended that. Plus, they wanted to redo the church hall downstairs. The toilets were 50 years old. They had no real good-sized kitchen. We wound up doing a number of jobs in the basement to bring it up to par. Wow. And upstairs, they wanted to redo the upper level. And what we did, they had carpeting at the altar area. We removed the carpeting and made it a mahogany floor. Wow. And then from there, we brought to the main gathering space, we made that ceramic tile around the aisles. Actually, in that church, we did ceramic tile everywhere. Wow. And they took the pews out, refinished them, and brought them back in. Wow. So the whole church had a new look, completely. And we put a handicapped toilet in on the main level.
Right. So now it's totally elevator accessible. So the 7 feet entering to go up to the main church or going down into the basement is no longer. It's
fully accessible.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. And you wouldn't know it to look at the church that this addition was put on after the fact.
That was the main idea, is to see the church and see what we can do to expand it.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Well, like I said, I've been an architect for a long time. Yeah. And I've had my own firm since 1977.
And so what is the name of your firm?
Design Partnership Architects.
And people have ways of getting in touch with you?
Yes, we don't have a website anymore,
Yeah.
but we do have an email address, designpartnership@verizon.net. And that works out well. And currently I do all kinds of work. I mean, I've done about 100 banks, did a number of condominiums, especially in the Fitchburg, Leominster area. Must have did at least 1,600 units in that area. Plus we've done work all over the place, such as buildings for people who have needs, special needs, and that I enjoy doing. And they're all accessible buildings. So, and in town, I live in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Our community has maybe 6 buildings with accessible needs that we worked with, plus local banks here, town, the events building, so if you have marriages or bar mitzvah or something, we had a building called The Burrows that just got torn down to make way for a 300-unit complex. Plus up in New Hampshire, we did a place that's called Promise to Keep. And those are all buildings that are unique in itself. So all kinds, any kind of restaurant. I'm just thinking of all the jobs, there's so many.
I love it. I love it. When you've had a lifelong learning plus experience with the architectural, and I see that you put a lot of your heart, your blood, sweat, and tears into the production with building after speaking with the people. You know what it is they want, you know what it is. And as far as disabled does not mean unable, and you've made these buildings accessible in every way.
Everything we do is involved in that. Plus, when we do a building, we start a job, and as my wife could attest, we love the job, we continue with it, and then I work all the way to the end, working with contractors to make sure we get what the parish wants or the bank building people want, and we get along reasonably well. And the most important thing is the end part, when you have to complete the job on a reasonable time basis, so you feel good about the job. And I follow it through. Sometimes we lose money on it, but I'm going to make sure the building's built to what they want.
Yeah. So on time, on budget, on time, under budget, whatever, you try to make it work so that in the end result is what the client wants.
Yes.
And in most cases, from what I've seen from looking and reading and researching with you, you go above and beyond, and I think that's telling.
Well, the thing is, I had good inspiration from my dad, who was a carpenter. He was an immigrant, and I used to go out with him at 9 years old to do small jobs on the side to make extra money. So, I mean, I learned a lot, and I thank God I did, because I can do carpentry work. And when I have a problem with a contractor or his workman, I was doing St. Michael's in North Andover, and I saw the carpenter trying to figure out the stairs. So I went over and I said, "Can I help you?" He said, "I don't have enough drawings." I said, "There is drawings. Look at this sheet. That's what tells you what the stairs is." So I'm having a hard time with the rail. I took my jacket off and I said, "I'll show you what to do. And don't be offended." Okay? Then his employer came over and said, "Please leave. I'll take care of it."
Well, you know, you have a respect for the artisan, though, yourself.
Oh, I'm an artist myself.
When you were able to jump in and help him out with his, it wasn't to be offensive, it was to, you know.
A system.
We can all learn from one another in a good
Well,
way.
you know, sometimes they don't know.
To close, I'd like to say that I think the people of Westford, especially from St. Catherine's of Alexandria and the viewing audience, appreciate that you were willing to take the time in wife's hospitality. It's wonderful to be here with you, and I want to thank you so very, very much. It meant a lot to me
Thank
that
you.
you would take this time out
I don't
of your
mind.
busy schedule to discuss.
At 83, I'm still working.
Well, I love it. I love it. And you've had a bout with some,
I had a year
medical
off
stuff.
because of,
Right.
unfortunately, I lost the lower limb of my leg.
Right.
But don't be a diabetic.
And well, that was the reason why I said disabled does not mean unable, because even though you went through that misfortune, you stayed active in your profession and involved, and I think that gave you the inspiration to continue to, show those less fortunate than we have that we can still succeed.
Well, luckily, I have a family that supported me through all this year that I was hospitalized for 7 months.
Wow, and look,
But, we got through it.
You're up and about, and you're doing fantastic work.
I feel
and
very
continue
good.
to do. And like I say, again, thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate having me.
Thank you, and look forward to our next episode of Livingston's Ledger.